We have a model where we take money from venture investors, we give it to engineers. That's how the business model works, basically. But except for that, now that we're part of Google, everything's changed.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome to episode 17 of Acquired, the podcast where we talk about technology acquisitions. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. Today, we're going to be talking about Google's acquisition of Waze. But first, we talked about in our last episode, we are going to be doing a community showcase. And this week, it's one of our listeners, Brian Sanders. He and his team are building something called Nextcast. Nextcast is a next-generation podcasting client that has a lot of interactivity baked into it. So they look at the existing kind of flat one-way medium of podcasting as it is today, and Brian and his team are looking at ways to make it kind of more of a two-way street. So you can have a relationship with a podcaster and click links and watch videos and things like that. The app's not totally built yet, but their customer development process and kind of their pitching for funding and things like that is being covered in a podcast called Building Nextcast. So check them out at buildingnextcast.com if you're interested.
It's really cool that we launched Community Spotlight and we did an episode about podcasts. And it's like they were listening to the episode. This is perfect.
Yeah, it's awesome.
So if anybody out there is building a social navigation app, please ping us.
Yeah, if you would like to be on our next listener showcase and you're working on something that you want to tell people about, shoot us an email at acquiredfm@gmail.com or tweet at us at acquiredfm.
Or hit us up in the Slack group, as always.
All right, listeners, our sponsor is one of our favorite companies, Vanta, and we have something very new from them to share. Of course, you know Vanta enables companies to generate more revenue by getting their compliance certifications. That's SOC 2, ISO 27001. But the thing that we want to share now is Vanta has grown to become the best security compliance platform as you hit hypergrowth and scale into a larger enterprise.
It's kind of wild. When we first started working with Vanta and met Christina, my gosh, they had like a couple hundred customers, maybe. Now they've got 5,000, some of the largest companies out there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and they offer a tremendous amount of customization now for more complex security needs. So if you're a larger company and in the past you showed Vanta to your compliance department, you might have heard something like, oh, well, we've already got a compliance process in place and we can't integrate this new thing. But now, even if you already have a SOC 2, Vanta makes maintaining your compliance even more efficient and robust.
They launched Vendor Risk Management. This allows your company to quickly understand the security posture of the vendors that you're choosing in a standardized way that cuts down on security review times. This is great. And then on the customization front, they now also enable custom frameworks built around your controls and policies. Of course, that's in addition to the fact that with Vanta, you don't just become compliant once, you stay compliant with real-time data pulled from all of your systems, now all of your partner systems, and you get a trust report page to prove it to your customers. If you click the link in the show notes here or go to vanta.com/acquired, you can get a free trial. And if you decide you love it, you will also get $1,000 off when you become a paying customer. Make sure you go to vanta.com/acquired. All right, Ben, should we get into it?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Waze. I would presume most of our listener base is familiar with Waze, but for those who aren't, it is a social navigation app, much like Google Maps or MapQuest going way back, or Apple Maps. We'll get into that in a minute. But you drive with friends.
Yeah, and so Waze's, magical insight is that there's a whole bunch of data being collected on the road by other drivers all the time that can indicate things passively, like, oh, there's high traffic there because people are going really slow. Now, Google's been doing that for a long time. They introduced that in 2009 based on data being fed back from Android. But what Waze does is it both plugs you in with a social network based on Facebook or importing your contacts, and you can, while you're driving, report things like red light cameras, like police officers, like traffic accidents, and you kind of get a real-time map when you're driving of the incidents on the road.
And this is really cool because before Waze, there was kind of like all of navigation and mapping was this like top-down thing where like, TomTom or Garmin, like they had their data set that was like canonical. And then, even Google was collecting it from Android phones. But before that, they were just buying it from these other companies. But the key insight in Waze was like, hey, people are driving around with this stuff. Like they should be sending data back about what's really going on in real time. So yeah, cool history about how this started. So Waze, is actually an Israeli company. And this is our first acquisition that we're covering out of Israel. It was started in 2006 by 5 co-founders. Ehud, I don't know if I'm saying this right, Ehud Shabtai was the main founder and CTO. And he was joined by Amir and Gili Shinar, Yuri Levine, and Ari Gilan. And Ehud had been given an old GPS system, well, new at the time, but now old to our view, GPS system by a friend. Those things that like my dad still has one of these that you like the portable things, like a Garmin type thing.
Yeah, like in once a year or something, you can download all the new map tiles.
Yeah, and you like, plug it into your cigarette lighter in your car and like, suction cup it to your windshield. So he'd been given one of these in 2006 and he thought it was super cool, and he decided to write some software for it that would allow people to share information about where speed cameras were located on the streets in Israel. And it started to take off, but the company that made the GPS device that he had didn't like it, and so they sent him a cease and desist letter.
Whoa!
And I believe we read that they said they'd be willing to like integrate the software, but like he had to stop doing it. And so rather than just giving them the software, he said, well, screw you. I'm going to take your mapping data out of this and I'm just going to create my own mapping data and I'm going to crowdsource it and build this through the user base socially. So he started a project called Free Map Israel. And the aim was just that, to replace this sort of like top-down map data set that this company had put in their GPS unit with a crowdsourced, living and social data set. And it started to take off.
Huh.
A couple of years later, in 2008, things are going well, and they changed the name of the project and the company to Waze, and they changed the terms of the map of the map data from being open and being usable by anyone to being owned by Waze. So Waze now owns and can commercialize all of the mapping data that its users are generating. And so that was in 2008. And then in March of 2008, they raised their Series A, the first capital they raised. They raised $12 million, led by Blue Run Ventures, which is a U.S. venture firm, and Magma Venture Partners and Vertex Venture Capital, I believe, who are Israeli venture firms. And it's interesting later, this comes to play after the acquisition. Noam Bardan, who joined later in 2009 as the CEO of the company, he writes a blog post and he said, one of Waze's mistakes was the valuation of its Series A, which significantly diluted the founders. Perhaps had we held control of the company as the founders of Facebook, Google, Oracle, or Microsoft had, Waze might still be an independent company today. This was after the acquisition, he wrote in a blog post on LinkedIn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the company continues to grow after they raise the Series A, mostly in Israel, and then they start to add other countries as well. And in December of 2010, by that point, they've reached 2 million users, and things are growing pretty well. They have over 250 million kilometers logged in the app, which is huge. Again, think compared to data that other mapping companies are using, which is not live real data. This is a huge amount of mileage that's on real city streets and routes that are getting uploaded to Waze.
Yeah.
So at that point, they raise a $25 million Series B from the same investors plus Qualcomm. And that was at a $95 million valuation. This was all reported in a Wall Street Journal article after the acquisition. And at that point, they opened up their first office in the U.S. in Palo Alto, which was really cool. I remember when I started at business school at Stanford and seeing the Waze office just like on the street in Palo Alto, like, oh man, there's Waze. Like, that's super cool. It was in a little storefront.
I had that same feeling. I remember when I moved out to California for a summer for an internship, walking up and down Castro Street and Mountain View and just seeing like all the different startups. The one that actually sticks out in my mind was Meebo. I remember it was like that web-based chat software that I had used a lot. And it's like really strange when you see a logo in real life that you're used to seeing digitally, like a physical representation on a building, and you're like, whoa, it's right there.
Yeah, this is one of those like really strange things that when you live in Silicon Valley, you like get used to really quickly and don't think about. But when you first like move there or you visit, is totally mind jarring. Like you see these storefronts, and they're actually like storefronts in Palo Alto and Mountain View, and sometimes even in San Francisco that'll be next to retail shops, and they're like, Waze.
Yeah.
So they raised the Series B. They had about 2 million users. That's December of 2010. Fast forward not quite a year to October of 2011, and here the intrigue starts to begin. October 2011, they raised their Series C, so less than a year later. They raised $30 million at about a $200 million valuation from Kleiner Perkins and Horizons Ventures, and they announced that they have 7 million users at that point, so October 2011. At the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, they announced they have 10 million users. So in just a couple months, they had 3 million users. Halfway through 2012, in July, they announced that they have 20 million users. So they've now doubled from 10 to 20 in 6 months. And then later on, by the end of 2012, they get to 34 million users. But a really important thing happens in the life of this company. And like I said, where the intrigue begins in the summer of 2012 at WWDC. It's amazing like how much Apple and WWDC ends up playing a role in our podcast here.
Is this the Forrestal?
Oh yeah. Scott Forrestal's last hurrah, last stand. It's like Custer's last stand. I was actually at
wait, say what it is.
Well, so yeah, I'm burying the lead here. Apple announces iOS 6 at WWDC 2012, and in it, one of the marquee features is they're launching Apple Maps.
Dun, dun, dun.
So they're ripping Google Maps out of the iPhone. So until then, all previous versions of iOS had the native built-in map software was Google Maps.
That was built by Apple, but with Google's data and Google's map tiles.
Yeah.
And I think it was something like the contract expired, and it was such that Apple didn't want to renew the contract with Google because they were starting to kind of part ways and get into a little bit of a war between the two companies. And Apple had to ship Maps early because they couldn't use Google's data anymore, and they didn't want to re-up, and they knew that re-upping would like come with a really nasty price tag for them, and a lock-in to send Google a bunch of data that they didn't want to. And I think Google is also requiring that people sign in with their Google accounts, which Apple didn't want to do for privacy concerns, even all the way back then. So Apple kind of like, obviously rushed Maps to market because it was really the only choice.
I think there's even more context setting that needs to happen here, which is that like as we were doing the research for this episode, like it struck me like just how fast the technology world moves. Like this was only 4 years ago, but it feels like a lifetime ago, and I had completely forgotten all this stuff. So this is at this time, the mobile platform wars, quote unquote, were like in full swing. Like Apple and Google are going at each other's throats, and like everybody in the tech industry is like, who's going to win mobile? Is it going to be iOS? Is it going to be Android? And, the tide's swinging one way or the other. And people think that this is going to be a winner take all market at this point in time.
Yeah.
The other thing that had happened is Tim Cook had recently taken over as CEO of Apple. Steve Jobs had passed away. the Apple was really, in a Tim and Apple, they were figuring out like what was going to be the path forward. It was becoming clear that there was no way that they were ever going to overtake or catch up to or overtake Android on actual user numbers. But like the world hadn't come to the conclusion yet, which now we just accept as a given, is that like nobody won the platform war. Like iOS and Android coexist peacefully.
Yeah, there's this, everybody builds for both mostly, and Apple kind of has the more valuable customers, and Android has most of the customers, and that's just the way the world works now.
And there are all sorts of tools now to make it easier to build for both, and but that was not the world back then. And so this is the stage. Waze had been operating for 4 years at this point, and had been growing the user base nicely and riding the wave of mobile. But all of a sudden, they are like at the center of this huge conflict between these two behemoths.
Yeah.
So at WWDC, Apple announces Apple Maps, and this has been years in the making. But as Ben, as you were saying, they had to rush the product to market when they actually shipped iOS 6 in the fall. And it becomes super clear. Like there was a ton of hype for this product. This was like the tentpole feature of iOS 6. It becomes clear within a week that like it is hugely broken. And there are all these reports of like people getting sent to the wrong addresses, causing all sorts of problems and accidents. And like it is a disaster for Apple when this happens.
Yeah. And the story, that Apple's trying to tell is like, it's two-sided. One is that, we really messed this up and we apologize. And that's kind of, Tim Cook comes out with that public letter.
Writes a letter, posts it on apple.com, apologizing. This has never happened before in the history of Apple. Like people are saying, this would never happen under Steve.
Right. But on the other side, Apple's hedging, and they're saying, well, it takes a lot of time for the data to come in, for it to get better. Apple Maps is only going to improve, which is true. It's gotten dramatically better. And that's the exact same story they had with Siri.
Yep.
And going back to the Steve Jobs comment, it's funny. This feels like actually a tremendously Steve Jobs move, because like Steve is famous for saying he's going to go thermonuclear on Android, and like when he gets into a tiff, like they get into a tiff, and like even if it has some fallout, like we saw here. I think that's a very Steve move, and that's actually Scott Forstall was largely responsible for this, and he was a Steve Jobs protege.
Yeah, and so closing the loop on the Apple intrigue here, this ultimately ends up in Scott Forstall getting fired.
Scott refused to write the letter. Tim said, "I'm going to do it personally."
Refused to write it, refused to sign it. Only Tim Cook signed it, even though Scott had publicly introduced the Maps product, like it was clear it was his product. And before Steve died and Tim became CEO, like the public talked about like, hey, is Scott Forstall the next CEO of Apple?
Right.
Like this guy he's not just like some Apple exec. He was like Steve Jobs's protege.
Yeah. And it's amazing that in this letter that Tim Cook writes, he lists some alternatives for people that are dissatisfied with Apple Maps, and says it's going to get better, but actually
alternative products.
Lists Waze as one of the products that people should go and try out instead of Apple Maps.
In the letter, which is again, this is like uncharted territory for Apple at this point. Again, because with the backdrop of they are locked in this feature war with Android, and another one of the reasons why that people speculate about why Apple and Google couldn't come to terms to keep Google Maps within the native the native iPhone software is that Google had recently shipped turn-by-turn navigation in Google Maps for Android, but it wasn't available on Apple. And people were speculating that Google was withholding that ability, which is hugely compelling. You got to remember, again, this is like more context, like like TomTom and Garmin and all these guys had navigation apps in the App Store at the time, and they cost like $100.
And I think they were patented. Like Apple, for whatever reason, I remember. Maybe I was wrong about this, but I remember the reason being that Google Maps for the iPhone didn't have turn-by-turn is because those companies owned the patent to that.
Could have been. Maybe Apple was concerned about that.
Or something.
But it was bizarre. Like the official Maps app on iOS, like you only just got a list of directions. Like it wouldn't talk to you and say like turn right in 600 feet or whatever. Like you had to like scroll through the list as you were driving or walking or whatever. It was terrible now, like, looking back on it. But if you wanted turn by turn directions, you got crappy products with crappy data from companies like TomTom and whatnot. But you had to pay $50-$100 for that just for the app. Like, could you imagine paying $100 for an app now?
Right. So the stage is set. I mean,
the stage is set. So in the middle of all this, Waze is free, and Waze provides pretty good mapping data and application. So it was kind of October 2012 by the time the dust settles. Apple's fired Scott Forstall. And then rumors start swirling that Apple is looking at acquiring Waze.
Which was actually never true. That I believe it was, who denied it? Apple.
Well, Apple denies everything. So
okay, yeah. Anyway, Apple denied publicly.
Apple denied publicly, but you got to imagine that, in the wake of this, that they're looking around and saying, "Oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Like, we just have this egg on our face, and here's this free app that like is pretty good in the store, and has a really interesting data model. Like, maybe we should buy it." And the rumors were that they were talking about a $500 million acquisition with Waze. How far that went, we don't know, but it doesn't come together. At the same time, in December of 2012, so a couple months later, Google launches a standalone Maps app, the Google Maps app on iOS, which many of us, myself included, now use and love. Does include turn-by-turn directions, but is just a regular app in the App Store.
And it was great. It was like this incredible... Actually, I know there was a 5-person team that did the native code, and they're actually in the Kirkland office here in Seattle.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I think the back end was all down in the valley, but the actual iOS app, the Objective-C, was written up here. And
wow, that's all. And when it comes out, like, it gets huge praise, and it was like better than the Android app.
And there's all these that was a big blow up. There's all these articles written about Google's new design paradigm because it was uniquely iOS but still familiar for people that love the Google interface, and they found this amazing way to combine the two design languages. And there were pieces written. There was a Fast Company piece that was written about how Google's new Google had this like design studio in New York, and they would go and work with all these individual business units, and it was like, I mean, I thought that it was really well made, and I think the rest of the world did too. It was so well received.
And I think actually that moment, looking back on it now, is the beginning, the heralding of the end of the mobile platform wars. Like, now, I think we can look back on that and say that was the moment when the world, at least Apple and Google, both decided like, hey, we can peacefully coexist here.
Yeah. Yeah, and Google knew that they had a good product on their hands, and if they released it, and I believe you still have to, when they released it, you had to sign in with your Google account, so that was a path to getting a whole bunch of data that they wanted.
And then Google realized they were getting all this data and all this monetization opportunity on iOS, and it actually was super valuable for them. So that was at the end of 2012, going into beginning of 2013. Another piece of context here, is that Facebook is now emerging as the big giant counterbalancing Google in the, again, in the post, as the world is determining that, Apple and Google can peacefully coexist, like Google's main enemy shifts from being Apple to being Facebook.
Yeah. And it's funny that it was Apple. This is weird detour. Google's core competency is being the best search engine, and that turns out to be a tremendous ad platform. So, 90-some% of their revenue to this day still comes from search ads or search and display ads. And they shifted direction. It almost seems like Android was a little bit of a distraction to go to war. Like they needed Android for a variety of reasons, but it made them focus on Apple as the enemy, since Apple, was also producing this like rival OS that came with great hardware. But really, Apple wasn't after Google's core business of search queries that led to
and
a
nor was
tremendous
Google
ad
ever
marketplace.
after Apple's core business of hardware sales. Like Google doesn't make money on hardware sales for Android.
No, but they really went to bat on trying to displace the iPhone.
Yeah, and it's weird, like, you know, historically, Google and Apple had always had this great symbiotic relationship.
Google does the services, Apple does the hardware and native software.
And, you know, Eric Schmidt was on Apple's board until Steve Jobs kicked him off after they launched Android. But, you know, then at the end of 2012, when Google launches Google Maps on iOS, it's like the détente is reached. And since then, it's like, I wouldn't say it's back to the good old days, but like Google and Apple both realize like, hey, we're not each other's enemy here.
Yeah. Apple makes hardware and software that are excellent, sells the hardware. They have services that differentiate them, but ultimately you can plug in Google's superior services on any of those devices.
And have a great experience, and it's symbiotic.
Yeah, but you can see why Google felt so strongly that they needed to control the input pipeline. It's the same reason that they make Chrome. It's the same reason they're distributing Chromebooks. Anybody who's the front door to the user has the power to redirect that. Like Apple shipping all these services associated with Bing in Siri, and maybe even the default search engine on iOS.
It's still Google, but you know, that's always back and forth. But
yeah, you can totally see why Google's like, okay, we need to make sure that we don't like lose, you know, billions of people.
The front door to the internet, which is where we make our advertising money, which is foreshadowing.
Yeah.
So Facebook goes public, you know, right around the same time as WWDC in 2012, the beginning of this Maps drama. The real threat emerges to Google, and that's Facebook's IPO.
Yeah, Google's you know, castle is where people are going to spend their ad dollars digitally.
And that's linked to where people spend their time and where people's front door to the internet is. And it's like, oh man, like, that's Facebook increasingly.
Yeah, Apple's not going to eat Google's lunch. They have no incentive to try and get that advertising pie. But like Facebook sure is. That's their core business. That's the real threat.
Yep. So we've just gone through this wild ride. Apple was rumored to be circling around Waze, thinking about a $500 million-ish acquisition to fix their mapping issue. Falls through. But then a couple months later, in the spring of 2013, rumors start circulating that Facebook is not only interested in Waze, but is going to buy Waze, and going to buy Waze for about $1 billion. This was in the press for weeks. It was almost reminded me of the Twitch deal, you know, about a year later, in that like everybody just thought this was like a done deal, that Facebook had bought Waze.
Yeah, and in my research, trying to look and see, you know, how Google justified this acquisition and you know, how Waze was doing as an independent business beforehand. So many of these articles that are all loosely titled, "Why is Waze worth $1 billion?" were written before the acquisition.
Yeah, nobody even knew Google was in the mix at this point. This was about Facebook.
Yeah. So the Facebook deal falls through.
And we don't know, you know, unfortunately, Waze was not a public company, so we can't go through all the SEC filings and do our usual magic. And to date, there haven't been any lawsuits for us to go through discovery. So we may never know exactly what happened with Facebook. But in some of the comments that the Waze team has made after the acquisition, one of the key sticking points apparently was that Facebook wanted to move the whole company to Menlo Park, to California. And the team really wanted to stay in Israel. So weeks keep going by, and the world assumes Facebook has bought Waze, but it hasn't been announced yet. And then, kind of out of the blue, June 2013, it's announced that Google is buying Waze for right around $1 billion, somewhere between $1.1 billion and $1.3 billion. Most of it was cash, but there were other stock and other considerations, and that the team is staying in Israel. Some of the Wazers who were in Palo Alto are joining Google in California, but the core team is staying in Israel.
Yeah, and this, you know, they had a pretty immature location-based advertising product right around this time. Do you know when they actually started having a business model other than
Waze did?
Yeah.
I thought you were referring to Google had a pretty immature location-based advertising product at this point in time, which also might be an accurate statement.
Yeah.
This was, I believe, when did Marissa Mayer leave Google to take over Yahoo? Topical, as Verizon just bought Yahoo this week.
Yeah.
But Marissa had been in charge of Google, local and location-based advertising products at Google before leaving for Yahoo. So I don't remember. I think she had left for Yahoo at this point. But
yeah.
Anyway.
What I was sort of getting at there is this $1 billion valuation has very little to
wherever
do with
Waze was in their monetization path, and they were doing things like they had sponsored gas stations and they had some like Safeway and other location-based advertising on the map. But this was a we'll get into acquisition category. Well, let's just get into acquisition category right now. This was not a business line acquisition. I will come down hard on that.
No.
What's your categorization, Ben?
I want you to go first because I'm going to do something unorthodox.
Oh, I'm going to do something unorthodox. That's why I turned the ball over.
Right.
Okay, I'll go first.
All right. Well, I'm doing it. So, traditionally on this show, we categorize either by people, technology, product, business line, or other. And I don't believe this falls into any of them because this is a data acquisition.
I agree.
And David, it's funny you were just bringing this up right before we talked about the show. I want to introduce for acquired going forward another category of asset.
Yep. This is clearly an asset buy.
Is that what was that?
That's exactly what I was going to say.
It's like right in here. All right. So apparently we are too.
Are we sharing notes or something?
No.
Are you cheating on the test, Ben?
We actually started 5 or 6 episodes ago. David and I realized that it wasn't very fun when we talked beforehand and then were of one mind when we got into the show, and then we would refer to things like we were talking before the show, which is less fun for you guys. So we were like, okay, we're going to stop talking before the show, except for a few things here and there to make sure we have all of our bases covered. And sure enough, here we both are again.
Yeah, and it's this is so clearly what it is because if you run through all of our previous categories for acquisition, this was not a people acquisition. The Waze founders were clearly very talented, but that's not Google had plenty of people who were great at
$1 billion is not a talent acquisition.
No, it's not. This was not a technology acquisition. The technology, as we were just saying, that was actually in the Google Maps asset was arguably as good or better than Waze at the time.
Yeah, they didn't have active reporting, but they had the passive reporting of traffic and had been doing it forever. And I actually had in my notes from real early research, why doesn't Google just do this themselves? Because this is exactly the kind of thing they're good at.
Yep. It wasn't a product acquisition. Waze still exists and lots of people use it and love it, but they didn't replace Google Maps with this.
No, and it's in fact not even part of the Google suite. Google finally now is bundling it as one of the OEM options when you get to choose all the Google services when you're making an Android phone, but it's still not a Google branded product.
No, Google Maps is still clearly the flagship location-based product. It definitely wasn't a business line.
No, it
but
doesn't make money.
Definitely was an other/asset buy. And the asset was, I think a couple things in this case, which is really interesting. I think we talked about this a little bit with LinkedIn, but this was a data asset. Waze generates so much very, very valuable data that would be valuable to lots of people, but especially to Google in terms of improving their Maps product, their core Maps product, in terms of their driverless car initiatives and everything they're doing with transportation, having real-time data and not just passive data being streamed back from the phone like they're doing with Google Maps, but things like, where traffic stops are, user-reported accidents, controversially, but has always been part of Waze, reporting where police officers are in speed traps and red light cameras and things like that. But also super clearly, as we've just been talking about with this whole drama leading into the acquisition, this had huge defensive value for Google. They did not want Facebook to have this.
Yeah, and even more than the actual asset of the data is they bought this data gathering machine. And I think that's why we haven't seen them mess with it at all, is because it had a great growth trajectory, particularly after the Apple Maps debacle. It was growing at like 100,000 new users a day.
Yeah.
It was insane. And, that obviously is short-lived, but they recognize that this thing is going to continue to feed us really great data, and data about the real world. Mapping data is something that is in need of being constantly updated. And Waze has invented these great mechanics that people often complain about because they say they're distracting while they're driving, but they've really created mechanics that people reliably feed really up-to-date information in high fidelity.
Yeah, both passively and actively.
Yeah, and the super high value asset is nailing the creation of that machine and the user experience that compels people to continue to do that over and over again.
Yep. Well, I don't know if I want to say I'm glad we're in agreement, but I think we should add this to our categories going forward, because Absolutely. This is so usually in other, it's like, oh, it's a one-off, but like this is very clearly a category that we just haven't come across before.
Yeah, I agree.
This is a great time to tell you about one of our very favorite companies, Crusoe.
So Crusoe, as listeners know by now, is a clean compute cloud provider specifically built for AI workloads. NVIDIA is one of their major partners, and literally Crusoe's data centers are nothing but racks and racks of A100s and H100s. And because Crusoe's cloud is purpose-built for AI and run on wasted, stranded, or clean energy, they can provide significantly better performance per dollar than traditional cloud providers.
Yes, we talked about that on our ACQ2 episode with Crusoe CEO Chase Lockmiller.
The other element that makes Crusoe special is the environmental angle. Crusoe, of course, locates their data centers at stranded energy sites. So think oil flares, wind farms that can't use all the energy they generate, etc., and uses that power that would otherwise be wasted to run your AI workloads instead.
Yep. Obviously, it's a huge benefit for the environment and for customers on costs, since Crusoe doesn't rely on the energy grid. Energy is the second largest cost of running AI after, of course, the price you pay NVIDIA for the chips. And these lower energy costs get passed on to customers.
It's super cool that they can put their data centers out there in these remote locations where, quote unquote, energy happens, as opposed to the other hyperscalers such as AWS and Google and Azure, who need to build their data centers close to major traffic hubs where the internet happens because they are doing everything in their clouds.
Yep. If you, your company, or your portfolio companies would like to use the lower cost and more performant infrastructure for your AI workloads, go to crusoecloud.com/acquired. That's CRUSOE cloud.com/acquired, or click the link in the show notes.
Cool. So what would have happened otherwise? I feel like, in a lot of ways, it's through what we were discussing in the history with the drama and all the different big tech companies circling around Waze. This company was going to get acquired by somebody. So I think that's what would have happened otherwise.
Yeah.
It's also interesting to think, though, I mean, this was 2013, again, not that long ago, reminding me again how fast the technology world moves. I feel like Ferris Bueller here. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you might miss it. Nobody was thinking about driverless cars then. And today, like, people think driverless cars are going to be the second coming, and every tech company and their mother is going after it. And what's interesting is that Israel is actually really companies in Israel and talent in Israel are really well positioned in this. There's a company called Mobileye, which is a large public company now that makes a lot of the sensors that go into cars that are used for autonomous and semi-autonomous applicathis
Is it the military influence that?
Well, everything in Israel is military influenced, but this is a yes. But it's interesting to think, like, would is independent Israeli-based transportation and driving-focused software company, combined with the hardware talent there, be a real player in the race for autonomous cars today? I don't know. I mean, clearly, big asset to Google right now.
Yeah, the hard part would be production. I mean, that's something that traditionally American manufacturing has been very good at making, but the Japanese are probably forthcoming Chinese cars.
Well, and it's interesting too. I mean, it's just like that that market is still has so far to go to play out. Like, do you actually have to make the whole car yourself? Could you make kits to put into cars that lots of people are trying to do? Can you just be a pure software platform?
Yeah, I think if I'm the car companies right now and realizing that there's going to be this driverless future, I think you have to make the bet that people aren't going to want to buy your cars in mass, but people might want to subscribe to your fleet.
Yeah.
And it would be like a Mercedes-based Uber, like a self-driving Mercedes-based Uber. And the question is, like, would people rather subscribe to a individual auto manufacturer's fleet or the things you can do for lock-in there? Or would people rather subscribe to a more generic fleet, Google or Uber? Or
in terms of, thinking about themes we've talked about on this show a lot, in terms of Ben Thompson's aggregation theory and owning the customer and the user experience, is Waze, is Google Maps, is that the user experience for driving now? And then the cars are the back end? I don't know. Maybe we should also spend a minute. I think it would be, because this is just pure speculation, as will this next topic, but what if Facebook had bought these guys? Like, what does the world look like now? Facebook has basically no play in transportation right now.
Did you see this isn't quite transportation, but Facebook's doing some like crazy cool drone stuff.
Yeah, super cool.
So Facebook's core competency is delivering ads to people, and they've basically run out of people with internet. So to expand past their existing massively saturated user base, they're trying to get internet to more people. So there's a team, I think it's a London-based engineering team that
it was a company, I believe it was a company they acquired.
Yeah. But they created this like gigantic drone that is super lightweight and can beam internet down and can fly for like a month at a time. And so it's interesting, like, while they're not in the transportation space, they are in sort of the large scale manufacturing space for completely different reasons.
Yeah, super cool. This thing is awesome. Like, it is a giant drone that can stay in the air for months at a time and beam internet down and probably do satellite imagery applications as well. Super cool.
Yeah, it is interesting. Like, why you could see Facebook buying this just to more effectively deliver local ads. I mean, this feels like Facebook at this point is looking for basically Facebook is buying digital social billboard space, and that's what Instagram is. That I don't know if that's what WhatsApp is. That eventually is what Oculus is, right? They create these experiences, and Facebook extends their core competency of being an advertising company into that. I think it's wildly speculative, but basically, like, Waze fits into that category of digital social billboard space where stuff comes up that is relevant to you, or people want to show to you, or your friends recommend. I think it makes sense in that context, and it just doesn't get used for the autonomous car stuff at all.
Yep.
It is interesting, like, to this point, until about 2 minutes ago, we've been talking about Waze in the context of the world when it was acquired. And it is interesting now to start thinking about it in the context of the world several years from now that's much more focused on requiring a super high fidelity data asset for autonomous vehicles.
Yep. Which is like, clearly Google, they'd already announced that they were working on self-driving cars as part of Google X at that point when they acquired Waze. But very few other people were thinking about this at that point in time. How much did that play into this acquisition or not at the time? Hard to say, but it's clearly, like, for them as a defensive move versus everybody else that's trying to get into it. Now, I mean, like, Facebook might have bought it, but what if Tesla had bought Waze?
Right.
Or what if Apple had bought Waze as they were trying to, and Apple is now, as widely reported, working on self-driving cars?
Yeah, did you just see they put Bob Mansfield in front of that?
I saw that.
In charge of it. Bob Mansfield is like their, I think he's a senior VP of hardware, and then like didn't agree with management or something when Scott Forstall was still there, and then moved to like head of special projects, and seemed like he was like half retiring, but now he's like really back in full force with Project Titan, or the Apple. I think that's the code name for the Apple self-driving car thing.
Yep. Interesting. All right, should we move on to tech themes?
Yeah, not that we haven't been in there for the last couple minutes.
Well, I've got two here actually, and one I'll just do quickly, which is we've mostly covered in this past section, but is sort of the value of a data asset, and but specifically the bent I wanted to talk about it is like, it's when you have the potential for a very valuable data asset, you can use that as like a way to upend the business model in the industry that you're playing in, and just give something away for free. So in this case, like turn-by-turn navigation apps, cost $50 to $100.
Yeah.
But Waze can just give it away for free because they're going to get their value out of getting the data,
right? And they don't have to pay to acquire it,
and they don't have to. Yeah, right. And they don't have to pay. And I think we've seen this in various ways in other acquisitions, both that we've covered on the show and ones that we haven't yet. Like I'm thinking about Instagram, right? Like Instagram was a social network, right? But there was also this app called Hipstamatic that was out before Instagram that was basically just the same thing, but it cost $3.
Yep.
And it gave you a cool photo filter for your photos. And Instagram came out and made it free. And like lots of people, I'm sure, tried Instagram because they're like, oh, cool, I wanted to use Hipstamatic, but I didn't want to pay $3.
Yeah.
And, same with LinkedIn. Like if you wanted access to people's resumes, you had to, pay recruiters and like go through databases and whatnot. And LinkedIn was like, resumes are free, Right. Skype did the same thing with phone calls. WhatsApp did the same thing with text messages. So I think it's
that's a really interesting way of looking at that I haven't really thought of before. It's like all of these companies found a way to make something free that was previously expensive, and then could upend that business model.
And I think a lot of the initial users that came onto these platforms were probably just like cheapos who were like, oh yeah, I was thinking about using Hipstamatic, but I really don't want to pay $3,
Yeah.
Or
which is like everyone, right? Like,
right.
Like as much I do that, you do that. Like we look
exactly.
At,
we're all cheapos in various ways. And, but that's the thing about like how you can get these winner take all markets, and what you need to tip the market in your favor is you need to, like, I love the Jeff Bezos quote at the Code Conference, which was this year, which was one of our carve outs a while back. He said he has this thing. He says, I think it was either Kara or Walt was asking him about Prime, and he's like, I want it Amazon Prime to get to the point where it would be irresponsible not to be a Prime member.
Yep.
Because you're getting so much value out of it. And like that's what this is here, is like it would be irresponsible to pay for Hipstamatic because you get more value out of Instagram and it's free.
Right. Which, especially with network effects, of course you get more value out of it. Everyone's using it because it's free.
Exactly. Network effects, they're a beautiful thing.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to do my two now. That was just one of yours, right? You have another one coming?
Yeah, but it's fast. So
all right, cool. I'm going to do both my now because they're related. One is bringing measurable online advertising into the real world. Google and Facebook both have ad units around this now of trying to attribute when you see ads online and when you go to physical retail stores, and understanding where those places are, tracking you either via GPS or sensors when you're in the store, trying to bridge transactions in the store and really get some good measurement around the holistic view of you in the real world and you online. And, Waze totally does this. You see a digital ad, you tap on it, you navigate to go there, and like there's people don't even think twice about the privacy because like the main purpose of Waze is knowing where you are. So you hand that data right over. You say, I want to go to this place. You navigate there. They might have paid for that ad, and then, or it might be a place that you're kind of organically trying to go to, and then Waze knows that you for sure went there, which makes it a pretty valuable ad unit and kind of ahead of their time. I think people were talking about doing this for a long time, but the idea of putting it into an app where you very explicitly have said, please track me, is
Did
pretty
I actually
interesting.
go there? Yep.
Yeah. And then this kind of falls out of my second piece, which is, or my second tech theme, which is banner ads totally failed on mobile. Like display ads were a thing on websites, and people tried to put banner ads on mobile, but there's such little screen real estate that even the display ad people on mobile have mostly fallen back to just putting a big freaking desktop square in the middle of articles.
Remember when, this would be a fun episode to do at some point, but when Google bought AdMob and Apple bought, was it Quattro Wireless? And like everybody thought like mobile display was going to be such a thing.
Yeah, I mean, there's that slide every single year in Mary Meeker's deck that says that the the mobile ad opportunity is still huge because the amount of minutes spent on mobile versus on desktop way outpaces the actual ad spend on mobile versus desktop.
Yeah.
And that's because like this is my tech theme. We're just now seeing the emergence of effective native advertising on mobile. And as it turns out, it's not a banner ad. It's not a square. It's not an interstitial. It's none of those things. It's not
Instagram, Snapchat.
Yeah. And it's Pokemon, right? Like it's figuring out what the very specific tailored experience someone is in when they're immersed in this, single full screen application. And like in the Pokemon case, it's, my God, we're so obsessed with finding the Pokestop or the gym, and like businesses can pay for the right to direct like people to go places in the real world. And that's going to be, in my opinion, the way that mobile advertising succeeds, is that it's native, it's very specific to the platform. And it took us freaking 10 years of mobile to figure out what the right way to advertise to people on that platform.
It's such a classic case of like, the mobile display ads being like the head fake that, it was a faster horse, right? Like it just wasn't, it was the totally wrong way to think about it. And we see this over and over again in technology that like, and we especially see it like being in, the startup world, like so many times people recognize an opportunity coming in a wave, but their mode of thinking is stuck in the old world, right? And like, it's the faster horse thing. Like, it's like, you need to build the car, and like Pokemon Go is the car, Snapchat is the car, Instagram is the car, AdMob was the horse, Yeah. It's a $750 million horse, but hey, good for that. And Omar, I believe the CEO is at Sequoia now. So yeah, he's doing great. Everybody, it worked out for everybody. I'm going to do my second one real quick. We've also talked about this before, but I think this is really, I put this in here because there was a great quote in that same blog post I referenced earlier that we'll put in the show notes from Noam Bardan, who was the CEO of Waze and still is from 2009 onward. And the theme is that like entrepreneurship is a global thing now. And like Silicon Valley is this incredibly special place and has its own network effect and is where the vast majority of startups are going to come. But like innovation is not a physical location based thing anymore. And Noam puts this great in his blog post. He writes, about how Waze was an Israeli company and the importance of that. He says, growing up in Israel in the 80s and 90s, I lived in a radically different world than my American cousins. We had one channel of black and white TV. Music and movies arrived 10 years later. There was no fast food or American brands, and we lived very differently. And then he talks about how cable television started flattening the consumer experience when that came out in the 90s and early 2000s. But then he says, then the internet like accelerated this change as people globally used Windows PCs and Explorers to surf websites. Social and platforms have pounded at it again. And today, most of the users have the same Facebook account or Gmail interface and use it very similarly. The final flattening of innovation in the world came from mobile. Anywhere you go in Israel today, you will see iPhones and Android phones, the same as in San Francisco, running the same consumer apps and delivering equal joy. On a family vacation with Waze management, it was amazing watching our kids, both Israeli and American, naturally communicate and share apps without the need to speak the same language. Like, this is like a sea change that's happening in innovation. And we're seeing it with stuff like apps like Musical.ly now that are getting big. Like, it's based in Shenzhen, but like, it's a big social network in America.
Yeah, I mean, there's still something to be said for density of networks, like just the people you encounter and the people you work around, and the speed at which information gets exchanged there.
Absolutely, but I think the nuance here though is like something like Musical.ly, something like Waze, like it's in both places. Like Musical.ly is in Shenzhen and it's in Silicon Valley. Waze was in Palo Alto and in Israel.
Yeah, I definitely the dual office thing. I would say like, you still sort of need to have your finger on the pulse in the hub.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we talked about this with Scott, right? Like the importance in the Exact Target episode. It was so important to Scott and to Indianapolis that they get the direct flight to San Francisco.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Okay.
Grading it?
Let's grade it.
So it's interesting. There's like two criteria to think through here. We're 3 years out from this acquisition, so we have a little bit of perspective. We can see what they've done with it so far. But then you also have to take into account the speculative view looking forward, which is a lot around autonomous vehicles. And, I think they've done a pretty, it's really hard to figure out what the size of the ad business within Waze is. I predict it is nowhere near close to paying back the purchase. Like this as a product,
I would be shocked.
Yeah, this as a product is not going to pay for itself, but the data asset has stayed really strong. Like people still use Waze all the time. Many like Uber drivers are using it and preferring it to Google Maps. It's in developing countries, it's used way more often because the crowdsourced data is way more accurate.
Yep.
So as those countries really start to come online, I mean, their default experience is Waze. It would be not great for Google if that was out of their hands. And I think that combined with Google's autonomous vehicle future and the great data that it develops, that it creates for itself, for its use in its own app, and that feeds into Google Maps, I'm going to go A- only because the A's that we've given out are just like wildly successful on a ridiculously fast scale.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's almost like, in some ways, this is a like I am going to give it a grade, but how I really feel is, and I know this is a cop out in some ways, but ways, quote unquote, it's too early to tell. Like, even though this happened 3 years ago, and it's too early to tell because just like 3 years ago, and this whole Waze story, I feel like was really the closing chapter of the mobile platform wars, quote unquote. What's happened since then, we're now at the emerging of the era of like machine learning is the really important thing in technology. Like we went from, Google's being very open and saying this, about themselves, but we went from a world, call it 10 years ago, where companies were, internet first companies. We weren't software companies. We were internet companies to, from 10 to 5 years ago, the world shifted to mobile first companies. Companies aren't just internet, like they're mobile and they're not just building desktop websites. But now like we're shifting to a machine learning based, companies are ML first. Like Google is very explicit. We are an ML first company now. And you see that across all of our products with Google Brain, with Maps, with TensorFlow, and the first, I think, like huge native ML application that industry that's going to happen is going to be probably autonomous vehicles. So,
already is.
It already is. I mean, Tesla's doing it. Like it was like, this was the Trojan horse. So how important Waze, and the Waze data becomes in that to Google, like I said, I think the value is still in the future. But that said, for the defensive reasons we talked about and for the value that they've realized even so far along that, I think it's an A- because, like you said, our bar is very high for the A's.
It's like it's an A- with low confidence that it's going to stay there, right? Like it either is going to be an A or it's going to not be an A-.
Yeah, right. It's interesting, like compare that to Cruise, which GM bought for $1 billion, like right around the same amount of money. Arguably, there's a lot more value in Waze thus far that Google has realized than, Cruise is still very much pre-product. So we'll see. That's a part of why I say though, is that like, it's too early to tell.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's bring this one on home. So follow-ups, we got nothing for you this week. But maybe next time, maybe we'll talk about autonomous vehicles. Carve out. What you got, Ben?
All right. So I've got a podcast for us, this week. I listened to one episode of this because I got totally roped in actually a while ago to a podcast called Song Exploder by their first episode, which featured the Postal Service. And what the host does, Rishi K. Sharaway, he sits down with an artist, a musical artist, does an interview, and also gets them to provide the actual track, all the different tracks that make up that song, and he'll listen to each layer and play each layer individually and have a conversation with that artist about where did this individual sound come from, and where did this instrument come from, and who provided this, and who did you collaborate with. And a lot of the times they even come with early recordings and demos and songs that inspired that song, and he does a really great job of kind of isolating these individual pieces so you go, oh, whoa, I can totally see that. And one of my favorite bands is Odessa. I saw them this weekend in Seattle at Capitol Hill Block Party. Their episode is super, super cool. They talk about, when they went over to Bainbridge Island to compose this song, and that's super cool. But the best episode, in my opinion, and it's sort of dangerous to start with this one because it sets the bar high, is an interview with Weezer, where the systematic approach to songwriting by this dude is absolutely amazing. And he has like spreadsheets full of lyrics that come out of his journaling that he highlights, that he then puts in there and tags by the number of syllables and the on-beat and the off-beat, and then combining all these different ones after he writes a riff. It is like, I'm not doing it justice. You got to listen to this. It's the Weezer episode of Song Exploder. It's so good.
Dude, that's awesome. I've heard about this podcast and been meaning to check it out. But I really need to now. That sounds really cool. It's like they're doing to songs what we do to M&A deals.
They are. And the production is so high quality. It's like a total treat to listen to each one. And it's gotten me into bands I didn't like before, and it's gotten me into songs where now when I hear some of these songs, after I hear it get exploded for 20 minutes before, it's like that song that comes on that's like one of my favorite songs if it was an episode.
That's awesome. So my carve out for the week is an oldie but goodie that was sent to me recently by a really good friend. And I'm so glad he sent it to me because it's a TED Talk, and it's Simon Sinek's Start With Why TED Talk. It's one of the top 10 TED Talks, and interestingly, it's a TEDx talk done at TEDx Puget Sound cool. Here in, I believe it was in Seattle in 2009, and it's just such a cool concept, and it's called Start With Why, and then he ended up writing a book about this. But in the sort of more raw version of the TED Talk, he talks about it as the golden circle, and it's there are 3 levels of communication about a company or a product or a person or a firm. There's the what you do, there's the how you do it, and there's the why you do it. And 99% of companies or firms or products or people say, "Hi, I'm David. I'm a venture capitalist at Madrona Venture Group in Seattle, Washington, and we do seed and Series A deals, invest in seed and Series A stage technology companies, largely in the Pacific Northwest, and would love to talk to great companies," right? So it's like people start with what, and then they do how, and then maybe they do a little bit of why. But if you actually want to inspire people and reach people and do something that has a much higher chance of success, you need to reverse the order and start with why. Say, "I'm David Rosenthal. I believe that all great companies in the Pacific Northwest deserve a chance to have an experience with their venture capital firm that's every bit as high quality as the best companies in Silicon Valley get."
Yeah, that was a lot more.
Do you want my money, right? Like, then that, like, it just comes across like you just by reversing about, like, talk about why you're doing something and what you believe in. It's going to be so much more powerful than starting with the what. Interestingly, Apple is the company that he uses as the canonical example here. We think differently at Apple. We design beautiful. We have beautiful, intelligently designed products, and those products happen to be phones and computers. Not we make computers
and cars.
Yeah, not we make computers and phones. We design them beautifully, and we believe in thinking differently. Like,
yeah, that wouldn't fit on the poster.
It would not.
All right, listeners, we have a longtime favorite acquired company to tell you about, Modern Treasury. Modern Treasury is the software platform that turns money movement operations into code.
Yeah, for years now, services like Stripe, Adyen, and Square have enabled developers to accept credit card payments in apps, but that's only the tip of the iceberg of what a business needs to fully handle the movement of money in and out of their company. Those payment actions from Stripe and Adyen, et cetera, flowed through to ledger systems and then reconciliations, compliance verifications, and that's before any cash actually moves between institutions, which of course involves banking operations.
Yes, their APIs, of course, work with Plaid, Stripe, Intuit, etc., but also with their incredible banking partner network with over 30 banks, meaning that for the first time, you literally can turn your banking operations at any of those institutions into software. This means faster payments, easy adoptions of new payment rails when they come out, like FedNow. It means automatic reconciliation and real-time financial data. This lets you move money at the speed of software, which, as we now know after the first half of 2023, being able to move money fast is very important.
Yes, we love Modern Treasury so much. The founders and really the whole team have become close friends of Ben and mine, really back to when they first got started. And this is a very cool full circle moment that just happened. We just emceed their first big conference here in San Francisco, Transfer, which happened at the beginning of June.
Yes, if your business involves money movement, be it a marketplace, fintech platform, real estate, lending, investing, or anyone who reconciles or moves money, go on over to moderntreasury.com/acquired and make sure that when you get in touch, you tell them that Ben and David sent you.
All right. If you aren't subscribed on iTunes and you want to hear more, you can subscribe from your favorite podcast client. And if you feel so inclined, we would love a review on iTunes, or tell your friends, share us on Twitter, and we'll see you next time.
We'll see you next time.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now?
All right, listeners, our sponsor is one of our favorite companies, Vanta, and we have something very new from them to share. Of course, you know Vanta enables companies to generate more revenue by getting their compliance certifications. That's SOC 2, ISO 27001. But the thing that we want to share now is Vanta has grown to become the best security compliance platform as you hit hypergrowth and scale into a larger enterprise.
It's kind of wild. When we first started working with Vanta and met Christina, my gosh, they had like a couple hundred customers, maybe. Now they've got 5,000, some of the largest companies out there. It's awesome.
Yeah, and they offer a tremendous amount of customization now for more complex security needs. So if you're a larger company and in the past you showed Vanta to your compliance department, you might have heard something like, oh, well, we've already got a compliance process in place and we can't integrate this new thing. But now, even if you already have a SOC 2, Vanta makes maintaining your compliance even more efficient and robust.
They launched vendor risk management. This allows your company to quickly understand the security posture of the vendors that you're choosing in a standardized way that cuts down on security review times. This is great. And then on the customization front, they now also enable custom frameworks built around your controls and policies. Of course, that's in addition to the fact that with Vanta, you don't just become compliant once, you stay compliant with real-time data pulled from all of your systems, now all of your partner systems, and you get a trust report page to prove it to your customers. If you click the link in the show notes here or go to vanta.com/acquired, you can get a free trial. And if you decide you love it, you will also get $1,000 off when you become a paying customer. Make sure you go to vanta.com/acquired.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth now? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Sit me down, say it straight. Another story on the way. Who got the truth?
Welcome to episode 18 of Acquired, the podcast where we talk about technology acquisitions. I'm Ben Gilbert.
I'm David Rosenthal.
And we are your hosts. Today, we have a very special episode that kind of breaks the mold of the show. We had an opportunity that we absolutely couldn't pass up, and even though we're not covering a single specific deal, we think this is going to be a super, super interesting episode for listeners out there. So, David, you want to tell them about our guests?
Yeah, we are lucky to be joined by a special guest today, Taylor Barreda, who is the VP and head of Corp Dev, Corp Strategy, and Strategic Partnerships at Adobe. So welcome, Taylor. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, excited to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Of course, quick background on Taylor. He joined Adobe in 2013 Before that, he was the VP of Business at Zynga. And before that, he was also relevant to our show, head of Corp Dev at Yahoo. He has a JD MBA from Northwestern. And after Northwestern, spent a couple years at Bain before getting into the deal-making world. And perhaps most interestingly, you are the first guest on our show who is a former professional athlete. Taylor played professional soccer, or probably more accurately, football in England. So maybe we'll get into that. Lots of deal making in that world.
Yeah, exactly. No, I would say that looking back on, I didn't have the language at the time, but there was no real U.S. scene when I came out of college, and so effectively I became an independent solo soccer entrepreneur. Had to go kind of figure out how to insert myself into the European game, and it was an amazing life experience, but not always the easiest.
Yeah, man, that could be like a whole separate episode. Probably not of this podcast, but I'm sure it's a cool story.
So what we thought we'd do for this episode is kind of stick to our typical structure, but instead, as Ben mentioned, of talking about one acquisition in particular, we just thought we'd use it as a vehicle to, Taylor, get your insights kind of from the inside of being in Corp Dev and how you think about deals and acquisitions as you're going through them. So we have a bunch of questions, but I thought we'd start with sort of the acquisition history and facts section as usual. And I think the best way to kick off would be something, that probably most of our listeners are curious about, and I'm curious about. How do conversations typically start between corp dev and startups? Either when you're approaching startups or when they're approaching you. What's the beginning of the story usually look like?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I think you guys even doing this podcast and this focus is, I think, filling a nice gap and need, because it's not something I spend a ton of time thinking about, because at some point it's just sort of natural and it seems very fluid and relationship driven and not some big moment of, hey, we're for sale. Although, those things do happen. But
yeah, and I think
it can be very sort of mystical and seem like this dark black art that, and I find sometimes that entrepreneurs, when it feels that way, they tend to pull back and be very reserved because they're not sure what they can and can't say, and they don't want to say the wrong thing, and all of which is totally fair. And so on our end, what I've always done individually when I've been a deal lead, and then what the culture I try to create on our group, is that you remember that the process is fluid, and it's hard to know which ones are going to actually go the distance and lead to a deal and which ones aren't. The Valley, as we all talk about, and sort of the broader technology industry outside of the Valley, is incredibly small. And so because of that, it's very relationship oriented. And because of that, the way these conversations often start is just literally a connection and intro, like, hey, you guys are in this space. This company's doing interesting things. You guys should just get to know each other. I've always liked, after stumbling across it at some point in the last couple of years, Mark Suster's blog post on investing in lines, not dots. And I think his concept is that it's very hard to make a decision when you only have one point in time. But when you've had connections over time and you have the benefit of sort of seeing people say what they're going to go do and then hopefully go do it or something better, it develops credibility, and you have time to sort of process and have a perspective so that on how it fits in. And so oftentimes it's as simple as that. We get introduced, we sort of say, hey, you should talk to someone. There absolutely is the other sort of 20% case where some company's been going off in a space that we haven't been tracking, or a company that we haven't necessarily focused on, that decide they either get the stereotypical inbound strategic interest from someone else in the space, and they decide that they want to talk to others and see if they want to sell, or they want to sell to us, or frankly sell to the highest bidder, that type of thing. And we'll get those calls, we'll take those calls, and we will sometimes do those. But that's a high bar. And we try hard to develop relationships so that sort of 80% of it is more strategy driven, more relationship driven, and there's broader perspective and a broader context that's developed over a long period of time.
Yeah, and in that original kind of introduction, when someone says, "Hey, this company is a newer company. They're playing around in sort of a similar space or similar customer segment to you guys," what's the context for starting that relationship? Is it a partnership, or is it just like, let's not play any games? We sort of know that there might be some acquisition at some point in the future, or what's the incentive for that entrepreneur to kind of start that conversation?
Yeah, look, you can waste an enormous amount of time if you just run around the valley talking to all the big companies, right? That's not your job. Your job's to build value for customers, and at some point, you're going to be able to monetize that value either through an IPO or the sale of the company. And with that as context, I think sometimes you get into a scenario of like, well, and I've had introductions where a VC was an investor in a company, tried to make an introduction for us, and the entrepreneur told the VC who was on his board, like, why would I even take that meeting? I'm not trying to sell the company, that. And I've always found that kind of humorous, because the whole point is, it's like the old saying of, when you want money, ask for advice. When you want, advice, ask for money, and that whole thing. It's like, if you're like calling us asking to be sold, it certainly can happen. But, if your first interaction is that, it puts an awful lot of weight on that interaction, and doesn't need to be that way. And I think it also ignores the point, which I always make, and when we sort of talk about it over time as things develop, is that if you're smart as a seller, you're going to have a fiduciary duty to get the highest value you can for the business when it comes to that time. So that just is. But at some point, once the deal takes place, you and the team will be working there. And so is it a place where you think your vision can not just sort of go and get parked, but hopefully can be accelerated, and it's not an end as much as it is a beginning? And are they the type of people that you want to work with? Do they see the world the same way? And those things, sometimes you think like, oh, that doesn't matter, we're just going to sell to the highest bidder. And it's like, well, yes, of course we get that. Everyone gets that. But it doesn't mean that you should ignore all other stakeholders, all other factors. And the way you sort of suss those out, and frankly due diligence on us and other places, and try to see whether it feels right, is by getting to know people over time. So I actually think it's best when it's explicitly not around a specific conversation. It's certainly fine if there is a specific partnership that seems very interesting with the big company, but those also can be colossal wastes of time. Every small company thinks that every big company is the keys to the kingdom, and a partnership with them will unlock everything. But oftentimes they take a very long time to get done. Once they're done, they take a very long time to mature. And the ones that are truly game-changing for startups are few and far between. And so it doesn't mean you shouldn't do them. It just means you have to be pragmatic about what you should expect from them. And so if there is a partnership you want, we oftentimes, act as sort of a concierge into this wildly complex 15,000 person company, which we sort of know how to navigate. And from the outside, it's probably extremely hard to figure out who to get to if you want to talk about a partnership around one particular product line. So we can definitely do that. But like I said, I think it's best oftentimes if it's much more open-ended, and it's just, hey, we're in this space, would love to meet, this VC that we both know, thought we should get to know each other, and, not looking for funding, not looking to sell, but, would love to grab coffee and just talk about what we're doing.
It's amazing, as we're talking about this, and even as we were preparing for the episode, like how much this mirrors the process of raising venture capital too. Yeah. Which, to be honest, I mean, it's an education for me. I never really thought about that, but we coach our companies when they're thinking about raising a round, all the time. You're always raising. You're not always closing, but you're always raising because of this very, it takes time to build relationships. And VC investors, as you point out, the Schuster blog post is great about needing to invest in lines, not dots. And occasionally there'll be a dot that, is so compelling you have to invest in, or it would seem for you guys, you have to buy. But it takes time to build these relationships. What do you think, as you're doing that, maybe talk a little bit about kind of the importance of culture and that relationship and the people fit. I know it's something that's really important to you in Adobe. How are you assessing that when you're talking to entrepreneurs?
I'd say Adobe, it's uniquely important to us, and we've walked away from, extremely large deals, north of $1 billion because we didn't feel like the culture fit was there. And part of it just has to do with how we think about what we're doing and what we think has made us an enduring business over 30 years in a really dynamic space. And, the company has morphed from, PostScript and printing tools and things like that, into desktop publishing and then creative tools and now into marketing. And now
Photoshop itself was an acquisition a long time ago.
Yes. Yeah. Again, that's somewhat unique. And then my understanding was it was a couple guys and a product, but yes, the nascent piece was there and then they built around it.
How does that, you talk about the qualities that you look for when you're acquiring someone to be a culture fit. How does that impact the outcome of the acquisition? And is there like anything in specifically that you sort of look for as, okay, this is going to be, this is going to make this outcome financially successful for Adobe because this person has X mindset? Yeah,
I think it's definitely related. I mean, I always say, we don't care about winning the press release. You create value, and one of the reasons why valuing companies is art, not science, in a strategic acquirer scenario, versus a private equity or whatnot, is that, like, look, and even in private equity, this is really true if you get down to it, is that, your valuation because of a present value of your future cash flows. Like, what drives those future cash flows is what you actually go do in the market together. Yeah. And inevitably, we're not like a holding company that's just going to buy great properties and let them roll. We're trying to have a point of view around the market and say, hey, look, we can come together, and maybe it's not 1 and 1 equals 3, but there's some sort of element of that overused word of synergy. And we're looking for leverage and looking for a perspective that we can accelerate the vision of the entrepreneur, but also, frankly, accelerate our own vision and hopefully even broaden it at times, just as we did when we went from creative to marketing with the Omniture acquisition. Excuse me. Right. And it's the reason it's so important is that if you have an incredible strategy, an incredible vision, we all know it's meaningless. It's about execution. Like, big companies are no different than startups in that effect. Execution creates value. Strategy is what allows you to have the opportunity to get into that mode, but you got to go do it. And I think the one last thing, and we've touched on this a little bit when we were catching up before the call, is that to me, if I had to pick one hallmark that gives me a sort of good, positive early indicator that we're on the right track, is when I start to see through the back and forth and comparing notes on the strategy and the vision, that this concept of accelerating the entrepreneur's vision around where they're going is there, but that's not the only thing. The other thing is they actually start to embrace the broader vision that we have, and say, you know what, I actually think I can expand your vision, and I want to get in. And if I could work with you guys on that, I could do something bigger. And so, oftentimes you'll see over time that the deals that work really well, and where it particularly works well for the founders or CEOs, is where they end up loving the concept of getting inside a bigger company, and maybe they're really dyed-in-the-wool product people, and all this raising money and all this other stuff is part of what they have to do, but it's not what they love. And all of a sudden they're unleashed and they get to just go do what they want and spend all of their energy there. And so whether it's here or, two of the smaller deals I did while I was at Yahoo, one was for a company called Citizen Sports, founder named Mike Kearns. I founded that company with another guy named Jeff Ma, who's well known from the Bringing Down the House days, and all that from MIT. But so Mike came in and just did phenomenally well. And then another was a company called Into Now that was founded and spun out by a guy named Adam Kahan. And those two guys stuck around Yahoo for, Mike just left about a year ago, and I think Adam's still at Yahoo, and they rose to be two of Marissa's SVPs of product. And these were smaller acquisitions, so it's not like they came in the door doing that. But they had a real passion for sort of online media and where it could go, and sort of not just what they were doing with their product, but what you could do if you applied some of the principles of social and mobile to the broader Yahoo business. And we've seen the same thing here at Adobe, and I think it's a classic sign that that things will work out quite well.
It's really cool to hear you talk about that. We had in one of our early episodes, we had Kurt Delbenny from Microsoft on, and we talked about the Accompli acquisition. And he talked about this very fact that one of the things that Microsoft is thinking about now in terms of M&A is just what you're talking about the people and the culture fit. Since Kurt's now leading the LinkedIn acquisition, but which is much bigger and more complex. But for Javier at Soltero at Accompli, he's now running all of Outlook, and exactly mirrored these themes. Let's move on. We sort of break acquisition history and facts into two parts, and my favorite part is sort of the stories of the acquisition, sort of is what we've been talking about here. But I bet a lot of our listeners will be really curious about what's the process. Once you've realized that there's a relationship here that could bear fruit, what are the steps in the process when you're actually working through a deal at that point? From LOI to term sheet to the definitive agreements. What are the key milestones for you guys?
And what specifically are you looking for? Is it cool, financial, check, cool, there's no lawsuits against them, check, cool, your product is growing with users, check, those sorts of things?
Yeah. Look, you have to, ultimately, you're going to do a deal, if it makes, strategic sense, the technology product fit is there, and the financials you think make sense for your shareholders, right? And for us, the fourth one that I would put that over, sort of cuts across all of that is just the people that, as we've already talked about. So the hard part about the deal is these are all, even though we have a quote unquote process in every large acquirer that is sort of a repeat player, right? And so all the places that I've been and done this role are definitely in that. And, the other ones are people like you mentioned, so Microsoft, Oracle, Facebook, et cetera. Repeat players absolutely have a process, and there's different flavors, and each company has different places where different types of decisions either take place or which parts of the org are responsible for them. So there's definitely a number of different ways to do it. But it's, every deal is its own, sort of perfect snowflake. They're all snowflakes. So they're deals, and there's unbelievable, correlations from them. And when you get into the granular, everyone has decided we're going to make this happen, it becomes kind of a machine, and the legal side and the diligence side starts to take on a life of its own, and that really does happen. So I would say in general, this is tough because on the outside, particularly if you're not going through a hardcore sort of auction process and have hired a bank or whatever, but it's a place where you sort of think, well, look, we're not really for sale, but they seem to be interested, so I'm open to doing this, but I don't want to sort of waste all my bandwidth and emotional energy and sort of exploring this. How would we do it? So typically, there's usually an early meeting, with someone in the business unit that's responsible for the product area where there is the strategic interest in the overlap, and trying to get an understanding for the product vision, the product technology, maybe a bit of a demo, a little early point of view on numbers. And I think sometimes it can be tough to decide, when do you share what? And I think, we're always fine if an entrepreneur feels like they want to get an NDA in place before they share some financials and things like that. We tend to try to make sure that we kind of have checkpoints. Like, if we get someone who's trying to sort of take a read on the market because they're about to do a fundraising round and they just figure they better think about it and they want to talk to a handful of people that are sort of the logical fits for that business, and say they decide we're one of them, and then sort of check in with us. We will oftentimes do at least one call without an NDA where we just sort of say, tell us the story, and we'll go through that. So there's sort of a high-level business product check early on, and then at some point you start to kind of have a feel for the financial side as well as you go through that. The biggest milestone you'll find with large acquirers is kind of the LOI or the term sheet, and that almost always. And I truly mean almost always, includes a no-shop provision, of some period of time, typically sort of 45 to 60 days, sometimes 30 days. Those are the types of things where once you get to that stage, you'll have a lawyer involved and they can advise you what is quote unquote market.
Just like a venture financing. It's funny how
exactly.
many parallels.
You're going to have your lawyer and they're going to be able to tell you what's market. They'll educate you on what the business ramifications are of what is being done. Every big company has slightly nuanced ways of doing things. And because we are repeat players and the lawyers are repeat players, there's certain things where, it's basically like, we're not going to do that because of the precedent of it and that type of thing. So oftentimes those are, but they, depending on, where the leverage lies, depends on how much those things get negotiated by the buyer or the seller. Again, exactly like a venture round in that respect. And then once you get through that, that's when you see the circle of knowledge on both sides expand, but particularly on the buy side. Sometimes it can be overwhelming because then we're going to, jump in and do a day minimum, oftentimes 2 or 3 days of kind of a deep dive, take us through the business, beginning to end, in terms of go through the product, go through the go-to-market, go through the financials, go through the operations, go through the technology architecture, et cetera. And then, that's when you build out a very detailed data room. And, I think with the super early stage companies, sometimes you'll run into some issues where, they didn't have their house in order. They didn't get good legal advice early enough on. And, maybe they were working with a couple of outside agencies and they didn't have them sign an invention assignment agreement, that type of stuff. Those are at this point, I saw that more 10 years ago than I do today. I think the breadth of, startup legal advice and sort of, smart, experienced angels as well, certainly the venture community, people tend to have a pretty buttoned up shop, particularly if they're venture backed, and things are pretty clean. But if you're outside of the valley and maybe the company was lucky enough to grow, bootstrapped or whatever, and they kind of just made it all work, every now and then you'll run across things where they didn't have their house in order, and then it's rarely a deal killer, but it usually ends up being something you got to sort of work around. So you drive through that. At some point, you put in place a definitive agreement where our lawyers will put together an acquisition agreement, depending on if it's a share purchase or an asset purchase, et cetera, and you kind of go back and forth on that, and try to get it finalized, and ultimately deals are announced once the definitive agreement has been signed. And then there's a question of, is it a simultaneous sign and announce and close, meaning, we signed it, we sent the money, we own it, or is there a split sign and close where, we sign it, we announce it, and then there's 30 days to meet XYZ closing conditions before, we would actually close. You'll see both.
Yeah, and you mentioned throughout all these steps, there was one point in there where the business owner talks with the company they're acquiring and compares vision and strategy and digs in with corp dev. How involved is the business owner throughout that entire process? Are they in every single meeting? Are they in that first meeting? Is it the business owner that first contacts that company? Like, what is their role, and what is the role of corp dev throughout the entire acquisition process?
Yeah, it's critical. So, one thing to know is you can't ignore corp dev. In many ways, they're going to be your guide and your partner throughout this. And I truly view it as a much more collaborative thing. If you're going to get a deal done eventually, it's going to be because everyone thinks it makes sense, and you're able to, get together at a valuation that everyone feels good about, right? So, I very much try to make it clear to people, and make sure that our deal leads make it clear that no one can, quote unquote, make you do anything you don't want to do. So that is one thing I think out of the gates to kind of demystify the whole process and take a little pressure off. The relationship with the business owner is critically important. In the language I use, and again, every company has sort of slightly different ways of thinking about this, but I think of it as there's an executive sponsor and there's a business owner. Oftentimes you will see, particularly if a company's kind of got some VC intros and things like that, they will be really focused on like trying to get in to meet the CEO or get to meet the, the head of the whole business unit. And
I've never been guilty of that.
Yeah. And it's fine. And everyone gets it, it's the old thing of come in high and work down and blah, blah. And it's sometimes it can be fine. Other times it can be either off-putting or even, sort of counterproductive in that if you get in front of them too early before the business owner and corp dev have been able to kind of frame it and suss out in combination with you sort of your business well enough that then we can effectively translate and help people understand why this is exciting, why this matters. They might take one meeting and be like, I wasn't that interested. And then it creates this uphill battle where corp dev and the business owner are like, no. We got to spend a little more time on this. Yeah. This one's interesting, right? And so
I've seen this play out. It's so true.
So even if you've got like this perfect, hey, my venture guy says he is like golfing buddies and best friends with the CEO or whatever, right? It's just a card I generally just sort of say, play it straight up, play it open, and then treat the corp dev person and the business owner as people that are your partners to figure out whether this makes sense. Not someone who you got to kind of like micromanage the thing. Because ultimately it's not like a enterprise software sort of SaaS. You're going into an IT group. They've got a need for a widget. You've got a widget. You're going to sell them on why yours is the best. And then, wham, we're done. Like, get it done, right? It's a very subtle collaborative dance where both sides are evaluating each other and getting to know each other. And you can't, it's sort of overblown to say it's a marriage, but look, you're selling your baby that you put heart and soul into creating. You want to find out if we're good stewards of it, if our visions align, and you should care about those things.
It's so funny going back to the parallels with venture. It just keeps coming up, but like we see companies make this mistake with us all the time is, they come in, they meet with one partner and, that relationship is progressing at a natural pace. And then, in the worst case, the founder CEO but oftentimes one of the other venture backers or somebody will come in and talk to another partner, and we call it partner shopping, and like nothing will kill a deal faster than that.
Yeah, and there's less issue with that here because we're not a partnership. There's a natural organizational structure to a big company.
But you're still going to somebody you think has influence, but actually has no context on the relationship. And back to that being the most important thing, can totally see how that can blow up deals.
Yeah, exactly. It rarely blows up deals, and that's the other thing why I say like there's almost no misstep that you can't get over if actually it makes business sense.
Right.
And that's the other reason why I say getting people in the mind space of like, you're building a great business, like you're going to get the exit you deserve. And we're looking for a collaboration to figure out whether we're the right home for it. Right. It's like, it takes all the pressure off because the real answer is you don't need to micromanage and overmanage it. Like we do this all the time. And if we're approaching it with that mindset, like we're going to together to figure it out. Right. Because the biggest reason people do that is because they're in like value optimization mode. In the back of their mind, they think, I got to maximize value. And it's like, yeah, totally. It is literally in the bylaws. It's your fiduciary responsibility, right? And we get it. And so it's part of that. But if you overmanage that and overplay it at the wrong times, it comes across awkward. And again, if it actually makes sense, you're probably going to recover from it. So even if you do, it's not that big a deal. Like I said, I've never not done a deal, but I've had deals where it was much harder to get there because, someone figured out some way to get in front of either the CEO or some other head of a business unit or something earlier than we probably would have ideally wanted. Or sometimes it comes in that way, and that's fine too. But then it's like, people got to do a job. To bring that whole thread back around to the core question, that you asked, I think it was Ben, the business owner or that sort of head of product is actually an extremely important relationship as well. Like you should have a sense of where, if you were king for a day and ran that business, where would you think that, the startup that you run fits in? And then how do you figure out who's responsible for that part of the business? And that's absolutely just as important a relationship. I would never say, only focus on that relationship and ignore corp dev, but I would also never say focus on corp dev and don't worry about that relationship. You kind of have to have both. And sometimes, again, it's this probably also is like the venture. It's very organic, and wherever you have an in a warm intro, take the warm intro and then ask the questions of, hey, should I talk to someone in corp dev or whatever? I have business unit partners who are very sophisticated, have sponsored deals many times, and part of the job of running a good, being a good product manager, let alone a kind of business unit, product owner or GM, is understanding the outside market and knowing the ecosystem that you're in. So they should be out there meeting startups and stuff. So oftentimes they will meet someone and they'll hand it off and say, you know what, I've met with this guy once or twice for coffee. I kind of like where he's headed. You should, like, nothing to do here. I'm not looking to do it. He's not looking to sell, but I just kind of want to get him on Corp Dev's radar. Can you meet with them? That type of thing. Other times we've partnered with the business unit to develop a strategy and overall, and we kind of know the spaces that we're sort of particularly interested in. We'll find a relationship or a company, and we'll get intros, and we'll pass them through. I think that is one difference between the VC and the M&A world, is that sourcing is not some big magical thing. We every now and then we'll find something that we didn't expect because we've made an extra effort to get out and beat the bushes, but we're out there in the market. There's only so many acquirers. People will find us 9 out of 10 times.
If you're lucky as a VC firm, you also are in that position. Most of us aren't that lucky, but
this is a great time to tell you about one of our very favorite companies, Crusoe.
So Crusoe, as listeners know by now, is a clean compute cloud provider specifically built for AI workloads. NVIDIA is one of their major partners, and literally Crusoe's data centers are nothing but racks and racks of A100s and H100s. And because Crusoe's cloud is purpose-built for AI and run on wasted, stranded, or clean energy, they can provide significantly better performance per dollar than traditional cloud providers.
Yes, we talked about that on our ACQ2 episode with Crusoe CEO Chase Lockmiller.
The other element that makes Crusoe special is the environmental angle. Crusoe, of course, locates their data centers at stranded energy sites. So think oil flares, wind farms that can't use all the energy they generate, etc., and uses that power that would otherwise be wasted to run your AI workloads instead.
Yep. Obviously, it's a huge benefit for the environment and for customers on costs, since Crusoe doesn't rely on the energy grid. Energy is the second largest cost of running AI after, of course, the price you pay NVIDIA for the chips. And these lower energy costs get passed on to customers.
It's super cool that they can put their data centers out there in these remote locations where, quote unquote, energy happens, as opposed to the other hyperscalers such as AWS and Google and Azure, who need to build their data centers close to major traffic hubs where the internet happens because they are doing everything in their clouds.
Yep. If you, your company, or your portfolio companies would like to use the lower cost and more performant infrastructure for your AI workloads, go to crusoecloud.com/acquired. That's CRUSOE cloud.com/acquired, or click the link in the show notes.
The next category that we talk about on the show is acquisition category. And so every deal that we look at, we say, was this a product acquisition or a business line acquisition or a people acquisition? We're curious on your end, like, do you guys do the same thing, or is it more organic, like as you're looking at different companies and then they tend to fall, like are you guys thinking like, yep, this is definitely an acqui-hire, or like, oh, this could be like a huge business line acquisition, or how's that going through your heads?
Yeah, I mean, look, there's industry standard lingo, acqui-hires, tech and talent deals, whatever sort of business acquisitions or product acquisitions. Those types of things are definitely, I've heard those used. We've used those all the time. We don't get too hung up on it. One construct I've used inside of our business is, from my Bain days, I had a respect for some of the profit from the core analysis, and they'd done, there was actually a book written a number of years ago called Profit from the Core, and they'd done analysis of like 2,000 companies and growth initiatives, both M&A and otherwise. And the concept was that once you understand what your core business is as a large scale company, understanding the business that drives the most profits and is sort of the most enduring, from a perspective of who is the customer, what's the channel to market, what's the geography you're playing in, what's the business model, and what's the product. Anytime you change one of those 5 things, you're like a one-step adjacency further from the core, and it creates risk. And actually, they showed through analysis of all these different companies that once you got, I think it was one step adjacency was maybe about a 30 to 40% chance of success. But once you got out, like 3 or 4 of those things changed, you dropped off to like 10% chance of success. It doesn't mean that you don't take, things that are multi-step adjacencies, because sometimes those are where the biggest opportunities are, but you have to make sure that they're worth the risk. Otherwise, you're just leading to sort of undisciplined diversification, and you have no better chances of success than just a private equity investor or a holding company, and probably less because it's not really how your business has been set up to focus the resources of the company on, right? So something like Omniture, we've gone back and looked at that, in hindsight, and that was probably a 4-step adjacency in many ways. It was, SaaS, completely new product. It was an enterprise selling motion, which we didn't have in mature fashion at that point. And the business model in terms of recurring revenue was new, because we hadn't moved to that with the creative side of the business. It was after that we moved from Creative Suite to Creative Cloud. So that was in hindsight a very risky big bet.
Yeah.
But it was a large big business that was the market leader, had real momentum, and so you could make that bet. And then if you focused on the rest of the things that you could control, it's ended up being a $2 billion plus. It's on the road to being more than that. Business for us. And so it's not that you don't do those things, but you do them for the right reasons. And so as you think about that, things that are in your core, like meaning we're already in that part of the business, that's where we're more likely to look for, some tech and talent, smaller kind of deals, or we look for like a little bit of a core expansion where it's kind of like a 1-step, adjacency, where maybe we get a new product with a bit of a business around it. It's been proven in the market, but it can't, it's not scaled yet. We bring that in and we scale it. The Marketing Cloud, in many ways, after the Omniture acquisition, there were a number of other add-on acquisitions that were done to broaden out the product portfolio and then sell through the same channel. In the enterprise space in particular, you've seen that, year after year. Once it's extraordinarily and perhaps not even appreciated how unbelievably hard it is to build a, true, large scale enterprise sales force. And the companies that have done that, that's such an unbelievably huge investment over, like probably a decade to get there, that then it's a question of, how do you maximize the throughput of that channel every year? And so finding additional products to put in the salesperson's bag is a big part of it. So on the B2B sort of enterprise side, that's a big deal. On the consumer side, it's a slightly different element in terms, and particularly, all the networks and everything with the social networks and platforms we've seen have changed the dynamics there a bit. But, historically, that was a little bit of Yahoo's original strategy was, okay, we have this portal, let's just keep adding on things, right? That was before my time at Yahoo, but it was, you see the approach driven by the business strategy. And I think that's, at Adobe, that's, and my personal sort of belief is that it has to be a strategy-driven process. And so the categorization of what you're going after is driven by what you're trying to accomplish strategically.
Cool. Moving on to our next segment, we always talk about what would have happened otherwise. And it's the part where we try and figure out, if this deal didn't go through, were there other acquirers, or, would that company have grown on their own? And I feel like a good question to kind of dive into there is, what percentage of deals that you look at actually end up happening?
Yeah, it's very low. I mean, very low. And it's a question of what look at means, right?
Right, yeah.
We've historically done sort of 4 to 10 plus deals a year. I mean, I think actually the market strategy is our sort of strategic umbrella is big enough to do meaningfully more than that. But we've kind of intentionally focused on a strategy that says we're going to make sure that the ones we do are going to work. And Adobe's, we've had bankers come in and be like, what are you guys doing? How do you do it? And because everyone around the valley is sort of saying that, the ones you're doing seem to be working. And I think a lot of it is just the willingness to say no. And that starts at the top. And we have a CEO, Shantanu Narayan, who, I describe as having founder level passion he's been here 19 years. He's been CEO 9. Wow. No different than a founder who just feels it in their bones and feels that level of passion for protecting the mission and the vision and that we're going after. And what that means is it's a very high bar on what makes it through the Rubicon of strategy fit, tech fit, team fit, financial expectations, et cetera. And so you have to be willing to say no, and in order to make sure that you get the right ones. You have to be careful that doesn't make you risk averse and not moving quick enough and fast enough, but I wouldn't even know how to put a percentage on it, but I would probably say sub 10%. A lot of things have to align to make a deal happen, both on both the seller and the buyer side. So you're probably looking at that plus or minus 1,000 inbounds a year. I mean, we probably get 2 to 5 emails a day with, "Hey, would you be interested in checking this out?" That type of thing.
Yeah.
And
there are
a lot of those, yeah. I mean, a lot of those, the answers, and it's probably again no different than VC. For us, it's just like, "Hey, that's not a fit, but appreciate you thinking of us." And we try hard to give quick answers and quick no's if we just don't think it's worth it, and we don't window shop. If we take a meeting, it's because we think it could be interesting.
That's awesome, and that's a great lead in. The next segment that we usually do is tech themes, where we look around and we try and figure out what technology themes or themes in the industry and the world does this represent to you. And I think a really good kind of twist on themes here is how have you tackled M&A differently at the different companies you've been at, and how have you guys taken a different kind of strategic or organizational approach between each one?
Yeah. Again, M&A is a tool. I mean, I've always joked that if I ever do something noteworthy enough that requires a memoir at some point, and this stuff makes it in, it would be like, it's not about the deal, right? That would be, there's the whole book with Lance Armstrong back in the day. It's not about the bike. It's like, it's not about the deal. I mean, the deal itself is mechanical. And if you love that world, and there's people who do, and frankly, it's a fascinating, fun world on a lot of levels. If you love that world, I mean, those are the folks that end up in banking. And I have tons of respect for those guys because I think their jobs are really, really hard, and they only get paid if things get done, So, and then they oftentimes get a bad rap, and there's, I think there's a lot of great ones out there, but it's just a tool. And so the question is, what is your strategy? If you sort of tie that back to your core question of like, how are things a little bit different at different companies? I'd say at Yahoo, we were going in a lot of different directions when I got in there. We were, because it was 2008, 2009 when I joined, and there was I found at times things were bubbling up, bottoms up, in terms of people being entrepreneurial and trying to get things going at the business unit level. And there wasn't, we were going through kind of a restructuring, and there wasn't as much of a clear, hey, we got to go do this tops down. And then you'd get the inevitable, hey, we got a call and supposedly Google's looking at buying this. And I was like, so, like, that's not a strategy. Like, doing what your competitors are doing is not a strategy, right? So we spent time around getting alignment around strategy. We spent time around locking in the concept of, from a process perspective, of an executive sponsor, so that you got the alignment early, tops down on strategy, and then it made sure that when we were spending time on things, it tied to that. But frankly, I mean, Yahoo had a reputation. We worked hard on this, but it was just a little bit of the reality. At some point of the culture was, we had a reputation for being a little bit slow, and so we tried hard to make sure that we were transparent with entrepreneurs around the different hoops and stuff we were going to have to jump through together, so that they could feel in control of it, and we could feel like we were in it together, instead of it just feeling like this monolithic bureaucratic thing. And it wasn't that, but it was just a nature of sort of how things got done and that culture and sort of where they were. And the culture of the company affects the process. At Zynga, I mean, the company had been founded like 3 years before. Mark's incredibly aggressive, dynamic entrepreneur. If he believed it made sense and we could convince him, then we could go do it. So, I mean, I remember working on a deal, and, we found out that some entrepreneurs had spun off from one company that we thought was interesting and gone and done something else. And you could just tell from talking to the guy that had been left behind was that the real creative juice had walked out the door. And so it was basically like, he got off the phone and was like being in a movie. I was like, find those guys, And so someone on the team got them. Someone on the team got them on the phone. We literally, like 2 hours later, we had them on the phone. And I was like, can you come to San Francisco tomorrow? And they were like, no, like, are you crazy? And I was like, great, we'll be there at 1:00. And we like hopped on a plane and went down. And like, it was sort of like, it was this incredible, it was fun because you felt like you were going to go make it happen immediately. It was that type of time in that company. And from a strategy perspective, we were trying, we had the sort of tiger by the tail in terms of, what was happening with social and everything. We knew the categories that we needed to add from a social gaming perspective. You needed to find the teams to go do them because we didn't have enough people in-house to do it. It was that type of voracious growth. And so it made strategic business sense to try to move that fast. And part of it was just, again, the culture at the top. It's just, look, I guess my point is the culture of the company, the strategy of the company, where it is in the arc of its growth will define what process it creates and how it goes about it, and then also what it sort of means. And at Adobe, we have these bigger arcs that we're working against, and from a corporate strategy perspective, what we've been focused on for several years are sort of three big trends. One is, as I sort of say, everyone in both the consumer and the enterprise side has been dealing with. It's just this unbelievable wave of mobile, and how do you get it to the point where it's truly a tailwind? And there's only a handful of companies that I think have really cracked the code. Facebook, the pivot they did, and I was there at Zynga when they were trying to figure that out, and neither one of us really had it working for us. They figured out how to make it work for them, and it really took their business to another heights. And it's like every year when Mary Meeker, now at Kleiner Perkins, formerly Morgan Stanley, comes out with that internet report, and there's that slide where she shows the percentage of time spent on the internet shifting to mobile. And every year it outpaces the trend line from the year before. And it's like, how do you get it to the point where that's truly a tailwind so that is just naturally making your business exceed expectations? So that was one, is make mobile a tailwind across our entire business. Second was, it's obvious when you look at the consumer internet that the last 10 years have been around unlocking network effects, right? Through social networks, marketplace business models, platform business models. There's a interesting opportunity, I think, in the sort of SaaS-based enterprise to look at unlocking similar network effects. And the way you do that is by making data and content really strategic assets. And historically, enterprise software has largely been, we're tools. We'll sell you a tool and you do whatever you want with that tool. Whereas consumer platforms look at data and content as the strategic assets that are sort of theirs. And there's a hybrid approach that I think you're starting to see emerge in B2B businesses as well, where customers certainly have their own data, but they blend it with network level data from the technology providers as well. And so those are some big trends that we've been openly pursuing, and really sort of came from outside in analysis of what was happening, not just in our own space, but actually was happening across the broader landscape, including the consumer world that I'd sort of seen at Yahoo and Zynga.
Yeah, that's great. It's really cool. The kind of next section before, or I guess our last section before we do carve outs is the conclusion, and this is where we decide. Usually just David and I, did this acquisition go well? Do we call it an A like Instagram, or on down the line?
Hard to argue with that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have any kind of internal process where you look back or even just isolated examples of what you look for and success metrics of, yes, that was a good acquisition and we should do more things like this?
So one of the things that our team's responsible for under me is the M&A integration function. And I've always felt like that's a critical to be combined in the same group, because otherwise it breeds a behavior that sort of feels like, hey, we're just responsible for banging out the deal.
It doesn't
matter if you throw it over the wall and someone else will integrate it, that type of thing. I always, myself, have thought of the job as a growth job. It just happens that a deal is part of it, and you have to partner with the entrepreneur and partner with the business owner and sort of be CEO of that growth opportunity until someone else can truly take the mantle that will be responsible for running that business. And if you think about it that way, there's little things where you put a little extra amount of care and attention into things like retention packages. And even though the entrepreneur is telling you that this person's critical, you're actually sensing that maybe that's more for historical reasons, and they don't understand that in the bigger company, once they're inside, this person who's been their right-hand person from an operational perspective, there's 3 other functions that are going to serve that purpose for them, and they're actually less important. So you kind of underweight, you sort of talk to them and collaborate to figure out how actually you want to maybe reward them more at the time of the deal, but actually put a little more retention for someone else that's going to, their importance is going to go up post-acquisition, those types of nuances. If you're not focused on the integration when you're doing the deal, you just do things differently. And so that's important. And so by having the integration function in there, we make sure that, you know, they're in our weekly meetings and we share learnings, and it's sort of part of the culture. So to me, it starts with culture inside the group, which is, you know, it's a growth leader function, not kind of a deal function. So that's one. From a formal sort of post-mortem evaluation process, we commit to reporting out to you know, our CEO and CFO as well as the board every year, every quarter. We do a report for 2 years. After a deal that reports against basic, you know, key value drivers and metrics. You know, there, as you might imagine, there's financial one, there's a product one, there's sort of employee retention, depending on sort of how many people we're trying to retain, that type of stuff. And we try to make sure that, you know, we're being hard on ourselves and, you know, not just greens across the board, but we're being honest about, you know, where things are sort of yellow and red. And every once in a while, we'll do a more formal deep dive post-mortem if something hasn't gone as well. You know, nothing ever, these things are really hard. And as I alluded to earlier with the statistics from the profit from the core, I always joke that in general, you know, this is not NBA free throw shooting. It's much more Hall of Fame baseball hitting, you know, meaning for those that aren't sports fans, you know, it's not 70, 80, 90%. It's probably plus or minus, you know, 30% is not all bad. And our track record at Adobe is actually, you know, dramatically higher than that. Now, every now and then it's like you make lemonades out of lemons where the things didn't work out like you expected them to, but you had the right team and the culture fit and the product to build from, and you went in a slightly different direction. And that's okay too, right? And that goes back to why culture fit is important. It says if things go wrong and the market plays out differently, you can still create value. There are definitely companies that have meaningful hundreds of millions of dollar bets that are effectively swing and misses and complete write-downs. And we haven't had that. And I think a lot of it has to do with the culture of focusing on thinking about the long range before you even do the deal. So the post-mortem and evaluation is important, but it's more the fact that you know you're going to be doing it and you know that that's what we all care about. And that's what sort of changes the upfront.
I love that as a way to wrap it too. That, you know, culture is you know, what's going to drive. You know, things are. It's interesting to think about, back to this analogy with venture. Like the happiest day of the next 2 years of your company is going to be when you close that round. Like, and then the real hard work starts. And you know, it's the entrepreneurial drive that's going to keep founders engaged when, you know, life is quite challenging. And I'm sure that's the same, you know, after an acquisition inside the company, and kind of gets back to, if it's not the right culture fit, you're not going to have that drive to keep going.
100%. And it can be sad too, because you see it where, I mean, entrepreneurs who sell something and it doesn't fit, and it ends up withering on the vine or being killed or dies inside a big company, you meet those guys later, or, you know, women, it's like they can't be more bitter, right? Yeah. Something they poured their life into, they feel wasn't respected and honored and whatnot. And sometimes, you know, the market plays out differently and they get that, and that's that. But if a big company, through bureaucracy or missteps or lack of culture fit or whatever, you know, destroys the labor of love that every startup is, that's just such a tragedy, right? And it's and yet in turn, the legacy that accrues to the founder when something is phenomenally successful post acquisition is enormous, and you see that, right? And so that's why I think the fit and people being aligned and going about things the same way just matters so much. because what you said about that kind of moment in time, hey, celebrate it. You got the money in the bank. And then when you do selling the company, it's not just the money in the company's bank. It's usually the money in the entrepreneur's bank account. So it's worth celebrating. It's awesome. It's amazing. Yeah. We always love to celebrate with them. But it's like that's why we test so much on the culture thing. Is like, yeah, it's day one. It's the beginning, not the end. And if you aren't fired up about that, by the way, it's okay if you're not. You just got to be honest about it early on. Because if you try to pretend like, oh yeah, I'm in it for the long haul, I'm so excited with this vision, it's like, we'll figure that out.
And then you piece, like, that's when you're going to be bitter, right?
Yeah, you can't fake passion.
Yep, totally.
So true in so many walks of life.
Let's move on real quick. We do have a follow-up we want to make sure we cover this week that I will just mention briefly, but Instagram. So Taylor, one of the things we do is if something new happens on one of the deals we've covered in the past, we call it out on the show. And in this case, relevant to 2 episodes we've had in the past, Instagram launched stories. So we covered Instagram as one of our early shows, and then we covered Facebook's failed acquisition of Snapchat. And super interesting to watch what's happening with Instagram stories.
Yeah, I don't want to dive too much into this because it's not the dedicated episode for it, but Facebook is very scared of Snapchat. Snapchat doesn't have the global penetration that Facebook does, so there's plenty of opportunity to defend international turf there, but they very well should be afraid of Snapchat because of the engagement that they're getting and the kind of, it's the first place that people check and where a lot more activity happens than Instagram. And it's really interesting to see Facebook, after having some failed attempts to launch Facebook branded platforms to disrupt Snapchat
and others. Yep.
Instead saying, you know what? All these kids are already on Instagram, even though Instagram is about that one perfectly curated, crafted photo. Let's see if we can throw this completely other paradigm into this and see if Instagram can be the one hub for that generation.
Yeah.
And
I feel like this might merit a future episode.
Yeah.
If you want to hear that, let us know on email or Slack. But let's move on quickly to carve-outs. Taylor, do you want to go first?
Yeah, absolutely. So my 3 most recent reads. I'm by the way, I read constantly. I'm sort of my family. My wife is definitely much more of a purger, and I think if I moved entirely to a Kindle, she'd be happy. But I tend to not only like to read books, but then sort of see them around the house. It just kind of makes me happy. I grew up in one of those households, and so it's just part of life and part of sort of embracing everything that's out there to be learned, and I feel like you can never have enough time to get through them all. But the 3 most recent ones I've read and actually loved all 3. One was Mindset by Carol Dweck, which talks about the growth versus fixed mindset. Book. And just phenomenal. And look, the basic concept you can embrace and understand in 30 seconds. It's the concept of, are you approaching life with this feeling that everything is fixed and you just got whatever talents you were given in life, and that is what it is, and you have to sort of expose those, but not, you don't have a chance to grow? Or do you believe that actually, you have what you have, but it's basically irrelevant? And the question is, what are you going to grow towards through hard work and effort? And what was fascinating by reading the book is when you describe it the way you just did, anyone who's sort of ambitious type A entrepreneur, or like those of us on this podcast are I'm sure thinking, well, I'm a growth person. I'm always trying to get better, and it's great. And I read this book, and it was very humbling to sort of realize that in some parts of your life you were completely growth oriented, in other ways you had intrinsically sort of had this concept of a fixed mindset that I have talent in that or I don't. And so thinking deeply about that for yourself, for your kids, if you're a parent, for your team, if you're a leader, I thought was incredibly powerful.
Yeah, wow. I was having drinks with a friend the other night, and he asked me, so are you more of a routine person, or are you like flexible to do whatever? And it was so interesting that, in the work that we do at Pioneer Square Labs, we're super flexible. If it's like, hey, you got to fly down to LA in 2 days because, the opportunity for this company is to meet with someone there, doing that. Or if it's your marketing today or your product today, like all over the place, and schedule changes all the time. But in my personal life, like I need to wake up at the same time and have the exact same morning routine every morning, or else I'm not myself. And it's amazing how different we can be in different aspects of our lives when we think of ourselves as either a routine person or a growth person or whatever it is, and it's not necessarily unilateral across the board.
Yeah, no, totally. That actually, I mean, that makes me think of another one, which, if you're exploring all the podcasts, and this one is I think literally or near the top of the charts, but I've definitely been enjoying Tim Ferriss's one, and I think his focus on routines and the questions around morning routines and stuff just fascinates me, because I'm probably, there's things where I'm somewhat routine oriented, but there's a lot of things where I rebel against it and don't want to commit to an absolute strict routine. Because I kind of like the dynamic that you described of like being ready for the most important thing and hop on the plane and go do that. And it's fascinating to sort of think about how important routines and systems are to success. That's another one I would flag. Before I turn it over, I'll just flag the other two. The second would be Shoe Dog, about Phil Knight from Nike, and unbelievable entrepreneurial journey, and just an incredibly revealing memoir that I really just found illuminating, inspiring, and awesome. But it also, to me, for you, David, on the venture side, it will give you will come away reading this book. You'll feel like you're doing God's work, because I think we underestimate how this concept that capital is almost available from anywhere, and that you guys in the venture community, and actually I have Adobe Ventures under me as well, so we do this here and there. Is that where it's like we're competing to be the ones who provide capital to the right businesses or whatever, and it's like there was this point in time where like businesses that are now like changing the world literally couldn't get capital. It was just insane. Like reading this story, and I'm not talking about a short period of time. Like for I can't remember, like 7, 8, almost 10 years. He was like on a shoestring and like trying to get these bank loans. It was just crazy. It blew your mind. So it was that one was phenomenal.
David is doing God's work. Let's be clear.
Yeah. No. Yes. Yeah, exactly. And then the last would be Originals by Adam Grant. That was just, sort of focusing in on creativity and sort of what are the hallmarks of people, and how do they go about that, and how do you be original, and who are the originals and stuff. And so, as I said, I think one of the fun things about software and internet is it gives a lot of clay for all of us to play with, and you can absolutely be an original if you want to go be. So those three have been a lot of fun. The last probably even 2 or 3 weeks I've kind of churned through all of them.
That's awesome. The Originals, I hadn't heard of that. I have to add it to my list.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go next real quick because it picks up on a couple of those themes from a disparate angle. We started the episode on a sports topic, so I can't end it on one. I can't not end it on one, given that it's the Olympics right now. And my carve out is, if you haven't seen, everybody's got to go watch Simone Biles, the women's gymnast.
God.
I mean, this girl is like the most dominant athlete in her sport I think I've ever seen. She makes Michael Jordan look like he's in the D League, would be the comparison. And she just won the individual all around gold medal in the Olympics by an enormous margin. Yeah,
I've never seen the person who is best in their sport be so far ahead of the entire pack.
Yeah, incredible. And I was watching an interview with her, or reading an interview with her, and one of the things that was said in it reminds me of the mindset, Taylor, of your carve out. When she was a little younger, I mean, she's still only 19, but when she was a little younger, she didn't really have a lot of confidence in herself, and would say, "Oh, well, I'm not as good as the other girls," and like, and now that she is like the most dominant athlete that's ever lived in the sport, pretty inspiring. So that's mine for the week.
Yeah,
love it.
Mine's a quickie. For those of you who listen to the Alaska Airlines episode, know that I have a thing for airplanes, and there's this incredible video on Vox. It's only 10 minutes long, on the history of the Concorde, how it came to be, how that was funded, what the other supersonic airplane undertakings were, and why we don't have supersonic flight today. So if that's for airplane nerds out there, you probably know it all, but it's just a really well put together little 10-minute video, and it's thrilling. So highly recommend going and checking it out.
All right, listeners, we have a longtime favorite acquired company to tell you about, Modern Treasury. Modern Treasury is the software platform that turns money movement operations into code.
Yeah, for years now, services like Stripe, Adyen, and Square have enabled developers to accept credit card payments in apps. But that's only the tip of the iceberg of what a business needs to fully handle the movement of money in and out of their company. Those payment actions from Stripe and Adyen, et cetera, flowed through to ledger systems and then reconciliations, compliance verifications, and that's before any cash actually moves between institutions, which of course involves banking operations.
Yes, their APIs, of course, work with Plaid, Stripe, Intuit, etc., but also with their incredible banking partner network with over 30 banks, meaning that for the first time, you literally can turn your banking operations at any of those institutions into software. This means faster payments, easy adoptions of new payment rails when they come out, like FedNow. It means automatic reconciliation and real-time financial data. This lets you move money at the speed of software, which, as we now know after the first half of 2023, being able to move money fast is very important.
Yes, we love Modern Treasury so much. The founders and really the whole team have become close friends of Ben and mine, really back to when they first got started. And this is a very cool full circle moment that just happened. We just emceed their first big conference here in San Francisco, Transfer, which happened at the beginning of June.
Yes, if your business involves money movement, be it a marketplace, fintech platform, real estate, lending, investing, or anyone who reconciles or moves money, go on over to moderntreasury.com/acquired and make sure that when you get in touch, you tell them that Ben and David sent you.
That's all we've got.
Awesome. That's a wrap. Thanks everybody for listening. And most importantly, huge thank you to Taylor for joining us.
Yeah, Taylor, where can our audience find you?
I'm here at Adobe, so feel free to drop me a line at barreda@adobe.com if you have something you think we should be looking at. I'm also on Twitter at just Taylor Barreda and LinkedIn as well. So feel free to reach out and happy to chat.
Awesome. And listeners, if you like the show, rate us on iTunes, tweet this episode to your friends, share it wherever you see fit, and thanks so much for listening.
We'll see you next time.
Who got the truth? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Who got the truth?